Picking up where I left off, if you haven't listened to the previous video, you might want to, because those are the phone calls that lead up to New Year's Eve, which is the candlelight vigil, and people are talking about the calls that were made during the vigil. They were actually made just prior. The vigil started at 4:30. The last call was made at 4:20. But go back, that's at the very end of the last video. Now I'm all the way up to January 1st. This would technically be, because of the 9-hour time difference that he's faking, this is now 12:01 a.m. Modesto time, which Amber, I mean, she's thinking it's 9 a.m. in Paris. And so she's talking to Scott, it's morning there, and it's just after midnight here. She is with her friend Sean celebrating New Year's Eve. There are 2 calls this day for a grand total of 87 minutes. So this is a lot of talking, and I won't go through it all, but I do want to talk about some really particular points. This transcript and recording was played in court. This is Exhibit 195-G. And I'm just going to give you some highlights of this. She does say that she's at Sean's New Year's Eve party. There's a lot of small talk about, like, well, what was your New Year's resolution? What was your New Year's resolution? And then they talk about the next time they'll see each other. And it's going to be 30 days because Scott has made pretty clear to her, even though we're now through Thanksgiving and Christmas and now New Year's, that he's not going to see her until the end of January. He's got business trips, and one of those is confirmed. There was a business trip where he actually did go to Mexico on a business trip, but he tells her he's doing all of these other things in between and that they can't see each other until the end of January. They start talking about birthdays, Valentine's. Amber's birthday is in February, so it goes Amber's birthday, Valentine's Day, then Ayana's birthday, all in kind of direct succession with just a few days in between. So they're talking about going on a trip. She's like, well, I've never been to Napa, so this is part of that call. She also tells him during this call, and by the way, this transcript, it's 42 pages long, I believe, and it's kind of painful to read through. And I don't mean painful as in these poor people. I mean painful as in Scott is a monosyllabic Neanderthal. And to listen to Amber try to, negotiate this conversation, like she's out, she's at a party, she's maybe drinking, really chatty, and he's like, sounds good. Okay. And so there are so many times where she's like, what's that? I'm sorry, what'd you say? And then he's forced to repeat it. And she goes, can you say that again? Like, I asked a question. Can you There is a point here, guys, where I start to wonder, does he suspect he's being recorded? I know he's not smart enough for that, but does he suspect that? Because his responses are just bad. Like, he doesn't want to be talking. She says she needs to hear more from him. And he says, in what way? Like more calls? And she goes, no, I need you to talk to me more. Tell me how you feel. I keep telling you my feelings and you're not reciprocating. At one point, she does ask him if he's still adamant, because remember they had a conversation, 15 days earlier about not having any children. She asks him at this point if he's still adamant about not having another child. And he says, yeah, he says, I'm not interested in having a biological child. I'd be okay with just, you and Ayana and us being the 3 of us being a family. And she says, so, raising my daughter as your own. And he says, absolutely, I would want to raise her as my own. He tells her he's scheduled to be back in town on January 25th. That's the next time they would even possibly be able to see each other. And then he has to go to Mexico on a business trip from January 28th to February 2nd. She says at some point, are you kind of interested in this relationship? I'm kind of trying to figure out where your head's at. I'm paraphrasing a lot of this, guys, because I just have bullet points written on my little notebook here. But then he also says at one point, he says that we need to spend more time together. Like, this is going to have to grow. This is, we're going to need to see where it goes over time. He does tell her to stop analyzing the relationship, that she's analyzing too much. We need to slow down and just let it grow. She says, can you give me, a little bit of indication about when you will come to a decision about me? And he says, do you need a timeline? And she says, well, yes, I'd like a timeline. And he says, if you need a timetable, I can't give you one. Like, I don't know. There's just too many things. We have to get to know each other. We have to let the relationship grow. Now the subject changes. She tells some story about some guy that got scammed by a travel agent or something. And then they start talking about their favorite movies. Hers is Romeo and Juliet, and she said the new one, which I'm assuming might be the Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes version, maybe. And then this bag of rocks says his favorite movie is Bubble Boy. Right then, I would have hung up the phone and never fucking talked to the guy again, but that's just me. She talks about karaoke, that her and Sean sing karaoke very badly. At some point, he asks what she's wearing. She describes that she's wearing these leopard print pants. And he kind of goes, you sound sexy. And she goes, oh, yeah, I'm looking real sexy. And I'm wearing this blouse and these boots. It's a lot of conversation about wardrobe. He then tells her that for the next 4 days, he's going to be going to Brussels and that he's going to be really busy. And he's not really sure that he's going to have much time to call her from Brussels. Toward the end of the call, and again, this one was played in court. Toward the end of the call, he does kind of warm up a little bit and says, you know, you're really a great person. You really deserve a lot. You're a good person and you really deserve, you know, to be treated a certain way. So he's kind of warming up to her at the end, kind of trying to keep her on the hook. Because by the way, this entire conversation, I feel like she's just working so hard to maintain the conversation and he's barely participating, which is why I thought maybe he thought he was being recorded. But at the end, he sort of warms up and he's like, you're really special. I hope you know that. You deserve the best. And then the call ends. Now, next is the next series. Remember, he's supposed to still be in Brussels. At least that's what he told her. So these all come in pretty late at night for Amber. So he's playing up the time difference. So January 2nd, there are 5 calls that day. It's instigated originally by Amber, and then there's back and forth for a total of 32 minutes. January 3rd, there are 3 calls. They start with Scott, and it's a total of 6 minutes. January 4th, there's 5 calls. It starts with Amber, and these are 69 minutes total. January 5th, there are 3 calls. It's 1 Scott and 2 Amber, but all of these went to voicemail. They did not connect. So January 6th is where it gets good. Amber has spoken to the Modesto police and they have, I mean, I use the word coached, like they have talked to her about, you know, the importance here is that, because nobody knows about her yet but the police. She's still an absolute secret. So the idea here is that she tries to get more out of him. They really want a confession. They really want him to talk about Lacey. They really want him. They need a smoking gun. So they give her a little bit more along the lines of questioning she could be asking. And from this point forward, you see an absolute pattern in her calls. When she's calling him, it's a little bit more interrogation type. And she keeps kind of going back. And she'll actually say it. She'll go, let's go back to that time you told me that you lost your wife. What did you mean by that, Scott? So you can tell, like, she's got a list of questions she's assigned to ask every time they talk. Now, January 6th was also one of those that they provided the transcript for in court. I'm going to just really quickly go through, but this is the one where Scott finally says to Amber, you know, that missing woman, Lacey, she's my wife. And during this conversation, you know, he tells her the truth about the lies. I haven't been traveling the last couple of months. My wife went missing on Christmas Eve. We've all been looking for her. It's been crazy around here. That's why I lied to you, because I was trying to find my wife. He says multiple times in this call, you know, she's alive. I know she's alive. We're going to find her alive. And then a lot of times when she's asking questions like, well, what happened, Scott? How are you involved? What's going on? He's like, I don't know. I can't talk about it. I really can't talk about this. We'll talk about it more when she's back. Once we find her, then I can talk to you and tell you everything that's really going on. There's just so much more you don't know. And I'm sorry, I got to go to another video, but come back because there's more in this January 6th call you got to hear about.